During World War II, the Allies desperately needed an advantage over the Nazis. But when they realized they didn't have any new weapons or secret technologies, they came up with something different. In a world of bombs and bullets, this secret weapon was made up of paintbrushes and props. It was a top-secret unit known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, also called the Ghost Army. This unit was made up of artists, illustrators, sound engineers, and actors whose mission was to deceive the enemy with one of the most unexpected weapons of all, inflatable tanks. These artists weren't just painting pictures of tanks, they were literally bringing them to life, creating inflatable replicas that looked so realistic they fooled even the sharpest Nazi eyes in the sky. And it wasn't just tanks. They made inflatable trucks and jeeps too. Anything that could give the impression of a large military presence was fair game. Their biggest and boldest plan was called Operation Big Stick, which involved placing these inflatable replicas all over the countryside in southern England. Once the setup was complete, the Allied troops would move out, leaving only the props behind. From a distance, the Germans couldn't tell these inflatable tanks apart from the real thing. It was like an army made of ghosts. But there was more to this ghostly army than met the eye. These inflatable tanks weren't just decoys. They were part of a bigger plan. A single prop on its own might have been easy for the Nazis to spot, but when combined, they created a convincing illusion. It was like a mirage in the English countryside, fooling the enemy into thinking there was a massive army right outside of town, when in reality, it was just a handful of brave souls and a few well-placed balloons. And if you thought that was crazy, wait till I tell you about the time they used sound trucks to make it seem like there were thousands of tanks rolling through the English countryside. The mission was called Operation Fortitude, and it was one of the most ambitious deception operations of the war. The Allied command wanted to convince the Germans that there was going to be a big attack in Kent, England. So they brought in sound trucks that played recordings of tanks moving through the countryside. The recordings were so realistic that the Germans believed it. They sent reinforcements to Kent, which ended up being a waste of time and resources. In fact, thanks to the sound trucks, the Germans were convinced that there was a whole division of tanks in Kent. If that wasn't enough, the Ghost Army added to the confusion by creating a fake headquarters for this non-existent division. They even made inflatable staff cars and parked them around the headquarters to make it look legit. The Ghost Army's work was so convincing that the Germans reported seeing Allied tanks in Kent. But what really happened to those German troops? They were sitting ducks. When the actual Allied invasion came, they were caught off guard and out of position. One of the most important parts of the Ghost Army's mission was secrecy. If the Germans had figured out what the Allies were up to, the whole thing would have fallen apart. That's why every member of the Ghost Army had to keep their mouths shut. But it wasn't easy. Imagine trying to keep a secret that you're remaking inflatable tanks while you're surrounded by guys who are about to go into battle. The members of the Ghost Army had to be careful not to let anything slip. They also had to deal with the constant fear that their work would be discovered and that they would be executed if caught. Despite the danger, the Ghost Army's work was vital to the Allied war effort. They were able to trick the Germans into wasting time and resources on decoys, which ultimately saved countless lives. You're probably wondering how many people we're talking about here. Well, at the peak of their operations, the Ghost Army had around 1,400 personnel, including artists, engineers, actors, and support staff. That's a lot of people who are not where they were supposed to be fighting. Now, you might be wondering what happened to the Ghost Army after the war. Well, some of the members went back to their civilian lives, while others stayed in the military. Many of them continued to work in special operations, using their skills to further trick the enemy. As for the equipment, most of it was simply taken down and stored away. Those inflatable tanks that had fooled the Nazis were deflated and put in storage. No one really knew what to do with them. They were a bizarre relic of a bizarre unit. Now, I bet you're wondering who was behind this wacky idea of using inflatable tanks to fool the Germans. Well, it all started with an American general named George Patton. Patton was known for his unorthodox tactics, but even he was surprised when he heard about the Ghost Army. He had initially wanted to use inflatable tanks as decoys, but he soon realized that they could be used for much more. With the help of a British intelligence officer named Bill J. Marshall, Patton created the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, aka the Ghost Army. Together, they developed plans for how the inflatable tanks would be used in battle. If you're wondering how the Germans reacted to being tricked by the Ghost Army, the answer is not well. They were confused, angry, and ultimately defeated. The fact that they had been fooled by inflatable tanks was a blow to their pride, and it made them even more determined to find the source of the deception. But the Germans never did figure out who was behind the Ghost Army. And that's one of the reasons why this unit was kept secret for so long. The Germans had never been able to identify the source of the deception. However, in recent years, several books have been written about the Ghost Army, and the story has become widely known. In fact, there was even a movie made about them. Now, I bet you're wondering what exactly the Ghost Army accomplished. Well, let me tell you, they were responsible for some truly incredible feats of deception. For example, they once created an inflatable replica of a landing craft that was so realistic, it fooled the Germans into thinking that Allied troops were landing in the wrong place. Another time, they set up a fake radio transmitter that broadcast messages between Allied commanders that were completely made up. The Germans intercepted these messages and were totally fooled. They were able to stage over 20 battlefield deceptions during World War II, tricking Hitler's army and diverting their forces from real battlefields. This saved thousands of lives and contributed significantly to the Allied victory. So what was the real impact of the Ghost Army? Well, in terms of lives saved, it's impossible to say exactly how many lives the Ghost Army saved. But it's safe to say that it was a lot. When you consider that they were able to divert German forces away from real battlefields, it's clear that they played a major role in the outcome of the war. Not only did they save lives, but they also wasted German resources and manpower. By tricking the Germans into attacking inflatable tanks and jeeps, the Ghost Army ensured that the real Allied forces were able to take the enemy by surprise. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think of this story? Do you know about the Ghost Army before today? Let me know in the comments below. And before you go, please remember to subscribe for more amazing stories. Also, check out these other videos that I think you'll love. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.